Okay, the recording is started.
Perfect. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining our Adult Education and Literacy Advisory Committee meeting, which we are now holding virtually. Sorry for the little technical difficulty and the late start there, but we're happy that you're here and that you've joined us today. I just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to our members for joining us today, as well as the public. We also have a couple of special guests that will be joining us today as well. Fabiana, next slide. So just as a reminder to everyone of our current AEL Advisory Committee members, we have Steve Banta, who's our presiding officer. He's also the executive director for Literacy Texas. We have Diana Contreras, who's a senior director of operational effectiveness in the supply chain for the Dollar General Corporation. Rita Hernandez, who's the president of the Cameron County Education Initiative. Janine Maldonado is the Director of Adult Education for Workforce Solutions, Tarrant County. And then Brenda Schofield, rounding us out here, is the Director of Adult Education and Literacy out in Region 5 Educational Service Center in around Beaumont. So thank you to all of our advisory committee members for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started with our agenda for today. So we always take time to go over the agenda for folks. We'll do and start with a TWC welcome, where we'll get to hear from some of our commissioner and commissioner's office staff, as well as go over some TWC AEL updates, which I will provide some updates that will hopefully lead us into the deeper discussions that we'll be having later in today's agenda. We also have joining us Dr. Suzanne Morales-Vale, who's with us from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. She's going to be talking about building a Talent Strong Texas, the new strategic plan. And then we're going to open it up, and Steve's going to take over for our committee member discussion today, which will be around addressing the digital divide and how achieving digital equity in Texas for all of our adult learners. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, and Steve's going to drive that for us. Next slide. So introductory remarks. I always like to give a little time here at the beginning and ask for our commissioners. I know that Chairman Daniels and staff are unable to join us today, but I do believe we have Commissioner Alvarez, who is on. Commissioner, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
I'm trying to use my camera, but it's not working. So I apologize to everybody. But I pulled over here on the side of the road. I'm on my way to the TEDC conference. I think that's where most of us are heading. But I wanted to welcome everyone, and I just can't wait to see everybody in person at one of these meetings. Just wanted to welcome everyone, and the agenda looks really good, especially when we start talking about digital divide. And I'm glad to see the folks from higher ed on the phone, especially as we move forward on the tri-agency report and updates. So Mahalia, wanted to thank you for all the great work that y'all are doing, working for, and you and I have had multiple conversations about how we have been very innovative and how your group has provided us with some really good input regarding how we can serve those individuals that have been underserved, like those that have been formerly incarcerated. And I know that we have a conference coming up where you'll get an opportunity to share all the great things that the agency does. So thank you and everyone that's serving on the committee for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Safe travels to where you're going. I know you're incredibly busy, but I thank you and appreciate the time that you gave us today.
Thank you, Mahalia. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. And then I think we also have Brian Owens, who's joining us for Commissioner Aaron Dimerson's office. Brian, are you on?
I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Commissioner Dimerson is on the road right now and unable to join us, but he wanted to send his regards and thank you for your service and contributing to our AEL initiatives and policy. And so thank you for all your work. It's not in vain. He appreciates it and is always interested in your meetings. So he's hosting a panel in Corpus at the TDC, Commissioner Alvarez mentioned, and where his panel is bringing the worlds of workforce development, education, and economic development together. So he's got some great panelists lined up to really bring all that together. And for some, we live in this world every day, but for others, it's all new information to them to be able to connect all three worlds together. And so that's the goal there. And we hope to have a successful panel in Corpus. And lately he's been promoting work-based learning, and that's through Texas Interns Unite. We did a press conference at Google last week where we had some interns speak and really promoting internships for all ages and all industries at Google. And then we did a virtual conference where we had over 500 people join the virtual conference. And a lot of those, majority of the attendees were students. So that was interesting, and they got a feel for what it takes to land that first job. And so anyway, Commissioner's been very, very busy. And again, thank you for your work. And we hope to listen in today and take it all in. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for the updates on the commissioner's happenings. I know they are very, very busy people and always traveling. So we appreciate the time and the effort and their continued, I think, focus and support of everything that we're doing in adult education. You reached on a couple of topics. I had to write them down because I said, we may want to circle back to some of those. Those sound like good topics for us, maybe in a future meeting. So thank you so much for your comments. Next slide, Fabiana. I think for me, I wanted to take just a little bit of time today to kind of talk about and maybe give a lead in for the discussion that the members will be having later today. And it's really focused on digital equity and remote learning. And I'm going to kill my camera because I'm getting a little feedback here. Hopefully that works and you guys can hear me. So I know that as we kind of continue to kind of move past the pandemic at this point and really transitioning back to whatever our normal was prior to that, I wanted to spend a little bit of time just kind of talking about some of the things that we really learned through the last couple of years. So when the pandemic hit, we had to kind of quickly move about 50,000 students into a remote or virtual service world, right? We had to start thinking of new ways to conduct old business. And that meant that TWC had to make some pretty big investments in order to support that transition. The commissioners approved a $2 million investment, and that investment initially went for staffing, it went for distance learning licenses, software, hardware, and it was really designed to help support this transition that at the time was very responsive to what was happening, kind of in the world. What we learned in terms of the immediate challenges related to the pandemic were things like, our students and our adult learners didn't have access to devices, didn't have the hardware that they needed. So even though we were working very hard to transition the instruction to a virtual environment, we had challenges related to that just in students' ability to access those virtual and remote options. We also had to kind of focus on our instructional support. We had a lot of instructors that had never, worked in a virtual environment. We had to provide professional development to them. We had to provide a lot of professional development related to things that we used to do in person, like testing. So we had a lot of challenges just with continuing to do business the way that we had been doing business. And what we really learned from that process was, well, once you kind of put students and start to give them options, because we're not really, we don't deal in the world of K through 12, we're dealing with adults, and those adults have jobs and they have responsibilities and they have families. And once we kind of provided this opportunity of having this virtual or remote and distance education option, we knew we were not going to pull it back. We knew that this was going to be something that the adults, learners here in Texas were going to want to utilize, and that we needed to work towards expansion of these things. So we really had to focus, I think, and refocus on how we were going to support that customer's need and that customer's desire. And so we had for a while been tracking distance education here in Texas and promoting this as an option and a supplement to what was happening in the classroom. And the reason why we had put so much focus on this all the way back to 2016 was because we knew that students who had access to those asynchronous options to be able to go and access additional instruction and supplemental instruction on their own, they did better faster. And it makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because more seat time and more instructional time equals, faster gains for students. So you can kind of see over time the amount of students that we had that were really engaging in those asynchronous learning options. Now, what we're learning and what we have learned, I think, over the past 2 years is that we have a real opportunity to grow that in a big way. But that means we also have to be responsive to the fact that we need digital confidence. And our students need digital confidence to be able to go and access these asynchronous options on their own, as well as just leading our instructors and making sure that they have the professional development and resources that they need to support that type of learning environment. Next slide. But we still have a lot of work, and we still have to really focus, I think, on a couple of things. One is, the quality of the instruction that we provide. So it's kind of a whole new world for us when adult education largely for the last 30 years has been a brick and mortar institution. So we really have to build that digital literacy, digital fluency, and those cybersecurity awareness, not only for our adult learners, but for our instructors as well. So the commission approved a $1 million grant that we developed a distance education professional development center. And this professional development center focuses on technical assistance and professional development related to sort of all these core things: literacy, fluency, cybersecurity awareness. One of the first things that we did under that center was develop a call center to support students and instructors who were now operating in this sort of virtual space. Next slide. And that call center, right now, it's open, it's active. So if you're a student and you're an adult learner or an educator and you're trying to access something that is a distance learning online, curriculum, and maybe you're stuck and you need a technical assistance really to be able to get connected to those things. This is open and it's live right now, and all of our AEL providers have access to this. Students can call anytime, 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And get the assistance that they need. So it's a very kind of responsive, just-in-time opportunity to keep our students focused. Because you can imagine being an adult learner, you've been working all day, you get online, you're trying to do your work, and you're having a technical difficulty. Well, you're probably just going to shut it down and walk away. But now there's this other option that can allow them to kind of continue those efforts. So those are just a couple of things. Next slide, Fabiana. Those are just a couple of things that we have been doing here recently that I think kind of aid and provide a little context and background for what the committee is going to be discussing. So this has sort of been a last, long-term effort here at TWC, but now all of a sudden we're like razor focused. So I'm really happy that we're having these discussions. And before we get started, I wanted to introduce Dr. Suzanne Morales-Vail with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about what is happening at the coordinating board and their new strategic plan, Building a Talent Strong Texas. Suzanne?
Yes, thank you so much, Mahalia. And before I start, we have a colleague on this call as well. So I wanted to introduce our Assistant Director, Mr. Keelan Morgan. And I think he also might say just a few words that connects a little bit to some of the points that Mahalia was making, especially in terms of connection to the special population, to the special needs of the adult learner population. So Keelan, if you want to say a few words and introduce yourself.
Say good afternoon, everyone. The specific initiative that Suzanne is referring to is our Texas Completion Repayment Grant Program. What a tongue twister. So I had to slow down and say it to make sure I got it right. But the Texas Completion Repayment Grant Program focuses on providing funds to institutions where they can relieve debt up to $1,000 for students enrolling in the spring 2022 semester all the way through spring 22, starting with spring 21. That's what it is, starting with spring 21 all the way through summer 22. So with that, it's really focused on assisting students with continuing their education and with a specialized focus on those students with some college, no credential, that adult learner population. So we're really seeking at the coordinating board to meet the special needs of particularly this population. And Suzanne will delve a little bit more into it and highlight some of the components of building a talent strong Texas and how that applies to furthering the work that we're doing, working with the adult learner population. Suzanne?
Yes, great. Thanks, Keelan, for that. And if you want to find out any information, more information on that, please feel free to email me or Keelan, and we'll be happy to give you more details. You know, there's also a number of other initiatives and programs, both federally funded and just us doing business related to the some college no credential population. Especially work-based learning types of activities, our Texas Works paid internship program. And we also participated, and we're very pleased to participate with the Texas Interns Unite program. So that said, let's talk a little bit about the building a talent strong Texas. So all of you may recall our big push, probably what, 6-7 years ago, about 60 by 30 techs, right? That was our new transition from closing the gaps, the previous higher ed strategic plan, and then we shifted to the 60 by 30 text plan. And all of you may remember what the 60 and the 30, what they stood for. So by 2030, we wanted 60% of the adult population, the ages 25 to 34, to have a post-secondary degree or certificate. And so that was one of the main goals. That's what we call our overall overarching goal. And then there were a number of other goals that helped support that goal. So we have now transitioned and as Commissioner Keller would like to say, probably updated and upgraded our 60 by 30 plan. And it's now building a talent strong Texas. And what we're really, really focusing on, and as also as evidenced through the tri-agency initiative and all of our work that we're doing with TEA and TWC and the coordinating board. But there's a couple of points that I really want to make with the building a talent strong Texas that we're especially excited about, especially from those of us who serve underprepared students and adult learner populations. So the first one is the attainment of the post-secondary credentials. What's really obvious is we've expanded the population of students that we're looking for, accounting for in our plan. And so you can see now, and this is really for those adults who maybe have started some higher ed post-secondary opportunities, but didn't complete. And so the first thing you'll notice is the new population now has been expanded to ages 25 to 64. The 60% still stays the same. But the other thing that is just super exciting for us is we talk about that population, 60% of Texans 25 to 64 will receive a degree certificate. And here is the new part, or other post-secondary credential of value. We still stick to that 2030 goal as the year we're really looking to see this change. But the other post-secondary credential of value is super exciting. You may recall in the past, a lot of the adult education and literacy and adult education programs worked through continuing education and other CTE programs for types of programs that were, if we could say, below what we call our level 1 CTE certificate program. These would be occupational skills awards, industry recognized credentials, but they didn't, while we did serve students and meet their career goals and their post-secondary education goals, and we aided these students, but we didn't count those kinds of completions in our higher ed post-secondary strategic plan. Well, now we will count those other post-secondary credentials of value. Next slide. So again, what we're talking about here is we're looking at the types of credentials that really have a big impact on our students and our learners going into lasting successful careers, and that equip them for greater learning and earning potential with low or manageable debt. And so some targets that we have here, again, we're talking about that 550,000 students completing a post-secondary credential of value. So again, we're starting not only with those level 1 certificate programs, but any credential of value. And that 95% of students, when they graduate or complete the credential of value, the degree or certificate, they graduate with undergraduate student debt at no or manageable level of debt in relation to their potential earnings. Now, what we're doing, we're working with a number of partners in developing the metrics that are going to be associated with this. And I know one of the really important questions is what counts as a credential of value? We're in the midst of trying to figure that out. We're still working on those metrics. Generally speaking, if we take a student who graduated with a high school completion and 10 years later compared that student with a student who completed a credential of value or a credential beyond a high school completion, and to see what kind of value added that student had in terms of earnings, then we would consider that potentially as a credential of value. And again, we're also considering many students who have a high school completion compared to those who have gone beyond and completed credentials of value. Some of those students may also have incurred some debt, so that is also factored into that comparison when we look at those that value added. And so I think this is really important. I think this will really spur additional transitions from adult learner programs, the AEL programs, into post-secondary, into continuing ed programs, into other CTE programs, and that really meet that labor market need, the current, future, regional, and local labor market needs, and also those wages, the family sustaining wages, to ensure that these really do add value to the students' post-secondary educational career. The third part of the goal, and the previous 60 by 30 was not so strong in this area. It was almost silent on the research and development component. And we really want to get back into ensuring that Texas is leading the country in generating knowledge through basic and applied research, and then translating and turning that knowledge into innovations and discoveries that directly feed into the economic development of the state. And some of the targets we're looking at is $1 billion in annual private and federal research and development expenditures, and 7,500 research documents awarded annually. And when we look at these research documents, I think something that we're really excited about as well is many of those, I'm looking at one of my colleagues right here at this meeting. They are in doctorate programs and EDD, PhD programs, and looking to see, what kind of research are really will really help contribute to the applied research and the basic research that's really going to help Texans and be on the forefront and the cutting edge of the R&D component of education and post-secondary education. So we're really excited about that, and working with institutions and a number, be on the lookout for a number of announcements in this area. And again, just to, I think there's Is there one more slide? Yes, so really, again, what we're trying to do is these goals not only make sense for productive and a prosperous Texas, but really we want to strive to be the national leader in post-secondary education policy and practice. And we're really excited. And I think we're one of the first states really to connect what we call completions and what we count as completions to really open and expand what it means and the value added that a lot of these really high value credentials, the value added they bring to students' completions. So for example, many students, even when they're in maybe some of the more traditional bachelor's program, adding a specific credential related to, like what we were just talking about, related to digital literacy or related to cybersecurity or those types of credentials certainly will add value to the employee's resume and will make it much more interesting for employers to look at that well-rounded and often the value that those types of credentials will add for the students and to the students' completions and to the resume of the student. So again, we're really excited about this. We're really excited about learning some more details as they become available. And I'm especially interested in ensuring that as best we can, aligning what a credential of value means for the AEL programs and aligning that as best we can to what a credential of value means for post-secondary education. So we're really looking at the same types of programs that really literally add value to the students' educational attainment and not only for themselves, but to really help with the economic and social mobility that we're all hoping to help with Texans and especially the adult learner population as they continue to broaden their resumes and seek the opportunities that are available then that are out there. So anyway, that really kind of brings me to the end of what I wanted to share with Talent Strong Texas, and I'm open to any questions that you all might have.
Thank you, Suzanne. Appreciate that overview there. I made one little comment in the chat, and I didn't see any other questions in the chat, but if there's any questions, particularly from our committee members, feel free to unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask those questions. But you know, I made a comment in the chat. It's just such an amazing concept to have a credential of value that is that specifically aligns to the student debt ratio, right? So you have students that are graduating with a credential that cost what is going to be equivalent that they could pay back the student or the debt that's been incurred from that credential, and that's a huge that's a big thing. And it's just a very smart goal. So any other questions from our committee members for Suzanne? I'll give them just a second in case they want to unmute.
Holly, I don't have a question. This is Steve Banta, but I just want to thank the doctor for sharing this with us. This is very important and interesting. I was part of the 3060 long time ago, so it's great to see where you're taking it. Thank you.
Yes, and I love that we've expanded the age from 35 to 64. I think that is marvelous as well.
Absolutely. It's just the thing that I always say is institutions prioritize what is measured and what is accounted for. And so it's so wonderful to really place that emphasis on our adult learners, those who have been out in the field. Some may have already dabbled a little bit in post-secondary credits, some not, but all of those are absolutely going to contribute to the future of our economic goals as a state, and of course, equally important for the individual and their families.
Yeah, we were just conversation the other day. I can't remember who it was with, but we were having a conversation about the aging workforce, and people are having to really work longer than they ever have before. And in terms of the needs of the employer, with everything related to the digital aspect of that, which is kind of one of the things and one of the topics we'll probably talk about today is, you know, you do have this aging workforce that maybe don't have those digital skills and maybe don't have certain credentials that are most up to date, and just having that opportunity because people are just having to work longer these days because, well, we're living longer too, I guess, hopefully. So that makes sense. Any other comments or questions from our committee members before I turn it over to Steve?
Something else that, while you're thinking, something else that I wanted to add as well, when we talk about these credentials of value, some of these credentials are super important, especially in certain fields, in the fields of healthcare, in the fields of, you know, computer science, computers. Some of these credentials are 6 months up to a year. So we're not just talking about a credential value, but we're also talking about a shortened time frame, Mahalia, especially the characteristic of the student that you just mentioned. They may have already completed degrees many years ago, and they're looking to reskill or upskill. And so these short-term credentials that can be completed quickly will certainly add to you know, the value that the employee brings to the labor market, and gives them an opportunity to contribute and continue to contribute, perhaps in a different time frame than originally thought. So I think this is very good. Not only expanding the population, but looking at what counts and what will be prioritized and continue to be prioritized by institutions.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Well, it's such a joy to have you, Suzanne. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot of conversations, and I love them because we just kind of get into the minutia of it all and really kind of get into the weeds. So I'm thrilled to have you here, and we've got some other stuff planned for Suzanne and the folks that she works with in our Fall Institute and some upcoming conferences to really kind of dig down into this and really see how we can support each other, and the alignment, of course, of all the tri-agency work that's happening. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate your inputs and your insights as always.
Thank you, Mahalia, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our presiding officer, Steve Banta, who's going to get us started on the committee discussion that we've laid out for today. So Steve, I'm turning it over to you.
Mahalia, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. The first thing I need to do is take roll call for the committee. So Rita, are you present? Rita Hernandez? Diana Contreras.
Present.
Brenda Schofield.
I'm here too, thanks.
And Janine Maldonado.
I'm here, Steve.
Great, it's great to see everybody. Mahalia, when you were talking and doing some of the introductory comments in the beginning, it just took me back to how far we've all come in 2 years and how much we've had to deal with. It's just pretty amazing when you think about it. And when the committee sat down to discuss topics, this digital literacy rose to the top. I just want to give you a little background here. Among the many challenges the COVID-19 pandemic exposed was the great inequity to access to technology such as computers, laptops, tablets, and broadband. The initial quarantine totally isolated people without these technologies. AEL-funded adult literacy providers and nonprofit adult literacy CBOs scrambled to take their services online or create a safe classroom environment. For small CBOs, the challenge was too great and they simply stopped providing services. For others, the shift was made, but in many cases, it excluded adults without the right computers or broadband access. At the national level, the disparity in availability of technology for different populations in both urban and rural environments led to passage of the Digital Equity Act. The Digital Equity Act would create 2 major federal grant programs. The proposed funding for each program is $125 million per year for 5 years, totaling $1.25 billion. One program would be carried out through state governments with funding allocated by formula. The states will draft their digital equity plan this summer and next. And then in fall of 2023, it is anticipated that states will implement their plans by subcontracting to local digital equity and inclusion service providers. These include state agencies, nonprofits, public schools, libraries, community colleges, among other eligible entities. When the advisory committee met to discuss agendas, this was the top issue, as I said. It is a very complicated issue because it is touched by so many factors. You have urban issues, rural issues, and they're all unique. Computer access, broadband access, funded AEL programs, nonprofit CBOs, broadband providers such as AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon all have special programs to help people get on their networks. And there are many foundations around the state and corporations that support adult literacy providers. So what we've done today is after we had our discussion, we've put together a number of questions that help us as a committee from all different aspects of Texas share our thoughts on how this has impacted us. And Diana, I think you're going to start us off with the first question, if we could see that, please.
Yeah, so before we get into the questions, I wanted to tell you that our team deliberated on this, and this was a really popular topic for us. And ultimately what we want to see is this process go on for the next 6, 8, 10 years if the funding is available. And it will touch not only metropolitan areas, but rural areas. And we're looking at pilot programs. So we'll pilot a program, we'll see the initiative go in, it'll be scalable and measurable. So right into the questions. So digital equity challenges. How does the digital equity challenge manifest itself in the community programs and businesses represented by our advisory committee?
Johnine, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so here in our area, it manifested in a couple of different ways. It was just depending on, the organization and of course the demographic, that you were serving. Several of the employers right out of the gate had expressed a need for assistance with staff being able to access technology, whether that meant giving them those digital literacy skills that they needed or assisting with providing some types of equipment. The immediate needs were now they were forced to be working from home. And now we have this timekeeping system that's kept, on a platform. And in the past, they were used to just, checking in and in person. So that was initially what we got a lot of from employers was just needing that assistance with those immediate digital literacy skills, for the workplace. Also, it manifested in the way, of course, what Mahalia alluded to at the opening for AEL, we immediately had to pivot and decide, make some hard decisions on how we were going to provide, some equipment or technology for the students to continue. And then also, how are we going to get those digital skills in their hands, and how are we going to provide that instruction for them in order to make sure that, that we don't just give them equipment that they can't use. So those were really some of our immediate challenges, that we had both on the AEL scale as far as serving our students in the communities, and then also with our employers. Another challenge that we had was working with some of our partnerships here. Some of the nonprofits, our faith-based and community-based organizations had reached out, and they were having some of the very same issues. They had staff that was providing these classes and wasn't sure, how they were going to do this on a Zoom platform, for example. So it was providing that support also for those entities to be able to continue to provide services as well.
So Steve, I'd like to offer a different perspective on this from an employer standpoint. So when the digital divide kind of happened during COVID, what we saw is we had to go to a digital platform. And of course, the employers are very quick to react. So when we started putting out applications, and this is just one example, putting out applications for potential employees, they couldn't fill them out. They didn't know where to go, how to do, you know, do I download that on my phone? Is it a QR code? Is it a www website? And, you know, if it weren't for the company that I work for saying, let's look at everybody, but if they were just screening based on digital aptitude, it could really knock out a lot of potential Texans to go to work. So there definitely needs to be some equity and some equality for those adult learners to get them back into the workforce. And now what employers are looking at is AI intelligence. So we really need to look at this. This is very, very important for the state of Texas.
So Diana, was Dollar General able to make that transition and help people get into the, you know, get through the application and get into the workforce? Yeah.
So what we did is we went in and we had open days of where people just could come in. So if they couldn't work the digital platform, we said, look, it's okay. Let's just come in, and we would have, you know, let's just say a Monday and a Wednesday set up all day. And we would actually show them how to fill out applications on digital application on a digital format. So if they wanted to work for us, that's fine. If they decided that maybe they didn't, because we always gave them a tour, but at least they knew how to fill out an application on their phone now. So yes, we did that.
I guess, Mahalia, this reinforces how important that digital literacy program you're working on is for the states.
And let me tell you, the morale, how discouraging is it if you go in and you can't fill out an application on your phone and someone doesn't call you and it's repeated and repeated and repeated. So with this format going the early entry level and intermediate levels, that is going to change the aptitude of digital proficiency when they apply with their jobs.
Thank you, Diana. Brenda, is there anything you want to share from your perspective on this?
Well, like many, all communities pretty much across the state, excuse me, the digital divide is linked to fewer job opportunities for so many of our participants in our adult education programs, just in the community in general. And that's something that we talk with our Workforce Solutions Board quite often about, so and how we can assist them. In Southeast Texas, it's just, again, there's just so many people who have lower or no digital literacy skills, and so it's difficult to get those jobs that require even those minimal skills. And we, like Diana was saying, it's frustrating and difficult for so many of the people who don't know how just to even fill out an application. So I love what Dollar General is doing there, and that's something that we do work with our students on as well. From a little bit different perspective, working with our local school districts, and I know this has been, we've all experienced this just as parents or grandparents, or you know, from every walk of life, particularly the last couple of years of COVID, is that the school districts are reporting that parents and guardians of the school-age children don't have the skills to assist their children with just the basic technology and computer skills that they need. Of course, that was a big issue during the COVID shutdown, essentially. But that's still, you know, I heard just the other day that's still in effect, where there's still some of the same problems. Some of the classroom applications, some of the online assignments, the parent portals, all of those types of things that we as adult educators really want to address and need to address with the parents in order to really help them ensure the success of their children and of the future generations. We found even in our college level classes where we have students co-enrolled in developmental ed, our IET students, the assumption was, generally that most of the younger people have really high technology skills. And we were very surprised to find that so many of our students, they're pretty adept at using their phones for everything. But as far as some of the just tablets and computers, they really need some skills there as well. So those were some things that we have found that are kind of in our area that has kind of caused us to make sure that we evaluate the different areas where we can be of assistance.
Thank you, Brenda. I'll share. I represent the adult literacy nonprofit community. We support the nonprofits across Texas. And with the help of the Texas Workforce Commission, we went to Baylor University to try to understand the impact of the pandemic on we surveyed over 285 literacy nonprofits, and we had a response of about 151 of them. So we feel that we had a pretty good sample. And from those, the biggest challenge for the literacy providers was the limited technology access. 63% of them said that in the nonprofit community, the technology just was not available for their students. They also had real trouble communicating with the students. Students weren't on email, or they didn't have a phone, or whatever it was. So even finding a way to communicate with students was really difficult. And then the last thing was finding volunteers in this environment to help out, 33%. So a lot of them actually shut down during the pandemic and are just starting to come back now. And at the same time, we're finding that people are not as open to meeting in person now as they were. They're still reluctant to do that. So the whole idea of digital equity is something that's very important to the nonprofit community as well. Any other thoughts or questions on this? Well, then let's move on to the response to these challenges. What actions have committee members taken to identify and address technology-related issues to providing adult literacy service? And what has been successful and why? And what hasn't worked so well? And what role does funding play in your program's challenges?
Steve, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize when they talk about it is awareness. A lot of people don't know that the digital divide is as frequent as people see, or people don't understand it. They assume that, hey, there's a center and you can go up there and use it, but it's really more prevalent than that. So I think we have to have awareness out in the state of Texas, whether that we send out Qualtrics or a Survey Monkey to say, hey, if you're in a metropolitan area or rural area, tell us what your challenges are for digital equity. Is that, hardware? Is that services? I think that's the first place we need to start to identify where do we need this help?
Yeah, you're right. This a lot of them are hidden, especially if you're in a urban area.
Yep.
In underserved areas, people are not going to raise their hand and come out and talk to you. You really have to figure out how to reach to them, meet them. As Johnine said early on, we need to meet the people where they are.
Yeah.
Brenda, did you have something to share?
Just generally some of the things that we have done, and that's a really good point, just about, like you say, just getting the technology in the hands of the people who need it. Even, this is just, we have a loaner program, and during COVID, even just being able to get these loaner computers and devices to the students was a big challenge. So fortunately, we're hopefully coming out of that, and certainly that's a lot easier now. But Just kind of in general, we always continue to reach out to our employers, pardon me, and our partners just to continue to identify those issues as they are pretty flexible and they can change. We did apply for a technology grant from a private foundation to equip a new adult learning center, and we did receive that. So another thing that we really try to do on that note is that we provide our open computer labs. We open as many of our classes as possible to our students, not just during class time, but try to have staff available that they can come in and work and do whatever, use that internet access, use the computers at the local sites, whether that's at the workforce solution centers, the libraries, the colleges, the learning centers, just to provide that. And I know they still have to travel to get that, but it does give them an option to be able to use those labs, and our computers have that internet access. We do have, like I said, the loaner laptop program. We equip those laptops for GED testing and CASAS testing, the pre-test testing. And we also have limited MiFis that we can loan, but gosh, they're so expensive. So those are very limited there. But we're providing, probably most people are doing, y'all are all doing the same thing if you're working in adult ed, but we just naturally we integrate the digital literacy into our classes. We also have some standalone classes, and we were speaking of the aging workforce, and that's our hottest group for our digital literacy classes. They love it, and they're just they're so engaged, and we just work with them on whatever it is that they need. If it's for their job, sometimes they'll come in and they just want to, they're having garage sales and they want to make flyers, or, many times they want to help, they're volunteering somewhere and they want to help with that. So we just work with them where they are to get those skills up to wherever they need for whatever purpose they need. And we're, of course, as I mentioned, we're in discussions with the schools about how we can help the parents of those children. And we are also planning a technology conference for our students. Every year, Region 5 has a big technology conference for all the educators and superintendents and principals. But we're going to do the same thing on a big scale with our students, using the local professionals and technology experts from the Region 5 Education Service Center, from Workforce Solutions, the local employers, local partners. So we want to make a big, have a really big program and a big conference for them that will just really kind of lend some excitement to that. I guess certainly not, this is not all inclusive, some of the things that I'm talking about, these are just things that we're doing. But we did get a request from Lamar University when they were working on a planning grant with the Texas Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And it's an accelerated credentials of purpose grant. It's just it's a planning grant. And so received word this past weekend that they did receive that grant. So we'll be working with them on that. So I don't know a whole lot about it at this point, but I'm excited about it. They will be working with students to develop certificates and badges for area workers that can be converted to college credit hours. And some of the areas are teaching with technology, developing web applications, digital literacy, productivity applications, and a lot more. So I'm excited to get to work with them on that. So anyway, those are kind of some things that we're doing to address some of those needs in our area.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm going to move on to the next question, resources available. When we were discussing this as a committee and we started talking about different resources for access to technology, broadband, and all of a sudden you're talking about ISDs or McDonald's, and where can people go in their communities to get access to broadband? There was a lot all over the place. And so this question here is for, we're sorry that Diana had to drop off. She had another commitment she had to get to today. So it's 3 of us left, but Johnine, would you talk a little bit about, is it clear what resources are available to you, and especially with all of your contacts within the community, where you see them have challenged with resources?
Sure, Steve. Early on, I just like everyone else, we went back and tried to look at some of those resources, and automatically, we went back to the same sources. So, we typically would our providers would tell students to go to McDonald's or Starbucks and access some broadband there or Wi-Fi. And in the pandemic, as you know, that wasn't an option. I mean, people were isolated. They had to be at home. And so that immediately posed a problem, because not everyone has that broadband accessibility at home. And then, as you guys know, I mean, it's pretty expensive. It's costly to be able to maintain those services or even have those services. So we started to look, with partnerships, we started to look around to see what was out there, and a lot of the companies started coming up with low cost or no cost broadband or Wi-Fi capabilities. However, it was being funded through some grants or other, types of funding that had strings attached to it. So not all of our students would qualify necessarily for those services. Maybe their income level was a little too high, but they were not taking into consideration, the size of the family, or they weren't taking into consideration other, factors. And so we found out really quick that that was not going to be a fix it all. So we started to come together to talk about, what resources and how we could make sure that those resources were available to everyone. As far as like having that out there available to all of our entities and our partners, we talked here locally about having some type of a repository or something, right? So individually in our silos and our programs, we hear about things that are out there and available, but they're not always put in a place where everyone has access to that information. And so we found that a lot of our community-based programs or faith-based were not familiar, with different grants or different abilities out there. So coming from the adult ed world, we have a wonderful TCAL portal where we kind of put all the information related to AEL and all the resources. And so I don't know, I just don't know really the answer to this question. This is something that I've asked my team to kind of dive deeper into, to see if there's some way that we could make sure that the resources are clear and make sure that it's in a location where everyone has access to that information. As far as an effective way, to educate all of the providers, really, we talked about here locally having like a focus group or a committee and inviting, all of our different partners and providers to be a part of that. We already do it in a sense, but just related specifically to this digital equity issue, because I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, even without the pandemic, we knew that there were digital issues prior to the pandemic. It just became more apparent when everyone was, kept at home. So we're just looking at ways, honestly, here that we can put something together where everyone would have that resource or those resources.
Brenda, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think that was very well said, and I think we're all kind of in the same boat with that. We do also have a really large group of partners. We meet very regularly, either face to face. Now it's either by Zoom or by conference call, and that's one thing that I hadn't thought about, is really maybe having a digital like a digital divide committee, or to really investigate that on a regular basis. But there is a lot out there, but we all do need to come together somehow and put all the pieces together. Everybody's doing their best in all of their, whether it's adult ed, or whether it's workforce solutions, or whether it's an employer or a faith-based or library, but we're not all coming together to do it as a group. And so I think that's a great point.
That's a real challenge. We're all very busy. From a nonprofit perspective, I talked to the nonprofits around the state, and a lot of them are very small. They're isolated. They don't have the time to research what's available. Many of them don't even know how to reach out to people like Johnine and Brendan, say, well, is there a way we can partner to have instructors on our premises to help with our situations? So it would be nice if we could find a way to more effectively communicate to everybody. The other point is, with the nonprofits, a lot of them view themselves as kind of a feeder system to the funded AEL programs. They help people get on their feet, or some people can't quite handle a rigid schedule. There's a lot of reasons that people can't take advantage of the AEL funded programs. But now, if we could get this done in a way that they can do this, it might make it easier for them down the road. With that, let's go to the next slide. This is something that's very exciting, that's going on in Tarrant County. It might be going on in other counties, but I happen to know about this one. And Johnine is going to tell us what's going on there.
Great, thank you, Steve. Yeah, definitely. We here in Tarrant County, we already knew prior to the pandemic that there are many CBOs and FBOs across the state that were providing the same services that we're providing. And we were looking at ways that we could come together so that we could ensure that there was quality services being provided uniformly across all of the programs, and providing it with the core elements that were robust and regionally responsive. The federally funded adult education programs, and then the CBOs, they're doing, CBOs and FBOs, nonprofits are doing the same kind of work. We're just doing it in different ways with different requirements. So we wanted to look at ways like, how can we build stronger partnerships between all of these programs? How can we work smarter and not harder? We're serving the same population. We typically have the same goals in mind. Our goals obviously are the same, to educate the community. And then again, going back to what Steve mentioned earlier, meeting students where they are, making sure that we're not trying to fit them into a small box or assume that they can just go into any of the classrooms. Unfortunately, so many times our lower literacy level students get put into or integrated into a classroom that is paced way too fast for them, or possibly isn't addressing what their immediate needs are. So those were some of the things that we all talked about here in Tarrant, and we knew that we really needed to address. We wanted to make sure that we're providing some type of, like Steve said, a pipeline or a feeder for these nonprofits to be able to continue these participants on a forward trajectory. We want to make sure we're moving them through. although we're AEL programs are federally funded, you know, for us here at the board, we're a grant recipient. It still really isn't enough money to meet all the needs, right? We're never going to be able to touch everyone that has a need, nor are we going to be able to fund all of the support or the services that they need. So we knew that, you know, we needed to come together and bring everything to the table, and let's, you know, be able to touch more people if we pull our resources together. And so what we've done is we work with Tarrant Literacy Coalition. They're actually part of our consortium here at Tarrant. And Tarrant Literacy Coalition does an amazing job of pulling together nonprofits along with the funded AEL program staff and provides like staff development trainings and various resources across the board. So we thought, well, we're already doing that. So let's bring everyone together into a symposium, and let's talk about this digital equity and what the issues are that's going on. Because just as Brenda said earlier, we're all kind of feeling the same thing. It might be at a different level, and it might be, you know, at a different perspective. So that was really how we came together for this symposium. We decided, like I said, as a group that we really needed to pull everyone in. We, as a federal AEL program, want to provide information for those nonprofits on how they can partner with us. And how that would work is just to provide the space for us to bring in our classes. We can bring in instructors and curriculum, and not just instructors, but instructors that have been trained and can provide robust classes for those individuals. And so that's what this whole symposium is about, is to just bring us all together and share what we are all doing and how can we, you know, make it work together, you know, to serve our community.
Brenda, thank you very much. If you are getting a theme out of what we're sharing with you today, I hope one of them is the need for improved communication and collaboration. It takes a lot of energy, but if you put the energy into it, it can make a big impact on your community. Brenda, did you have something to add to this?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. I'm looking forward to hearing how everything, hearing the results. I think it's wonderful.
Come and join us. Come and join us. We are going to be, we'll be all there on Saturday, the 25th. So please come and join us.
It's a virtual get together, so everybody can join in. I recently visited Laredo, where they had a literacy symposium. And one of the things I heard from the volunteers down in Laredo was they had no idea all of the wonderful services that were being provided by the AEL funded programs. And it just opened their eyes wide open to all of the good work being done. And they do represent a certain constituency there, but they wanted to learn more about how they can cooperate. So it's just another example of how doing this collaboration, working together, and you need very specific goals, because you're not going to get anything out of it if you don't have very specific goals. And the goal is to, from my perspective, expand capacity in the community, meet the needs of more adult students who need it, and find a way to help them get into the system at the right place at the right time so they can move through it, as Johnine was pointing out. One of the unique things about Tarrant County is that they have a call center for people who are looking for adult literacy, because they found that if somebody calls up and they don't get an answer the first time, they get frustrated very quick, and they don't move forward with pursuing that. But what Tarrant County does is they do an intake and they find out what the needs are, and then they find the right program to match that individual, and they match them up So they have a very good success rate in placing people where they need to be.
Yeah, and Steve, can I just add that additionally, something that we didn't expect to happen was that that call center, you know, our call center, that we're in our 3rd year now and has been just absolutely phenomenal. But we're finding that not just our participants are reaching out, but we have community partners that have ended up reaching out through the call center because they've, of course, seen it in marketing or outreach information. And now that's kind of started to build that communication that you were talking about earlier. We're starting to learn about each other and communicate and connect. And so it's just been it's been a good experience, you know, for the hub. And going back to our digital equity, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of students that were panicked, of course. And so they were calling the call center, you know, how do I get back in class? What do I, you know, what are we going to do? And as a result of all of the number of calls that we got and the information that the call center collects, we discovered really quickly that the problem with a lot of our students was technology, not having the access to it. So a lot of them said, my child is being given a laptop to go home and work on their schoolwork, but I can't get on it as an adult. So I can't do remote classes. And as a result of that, what I did was reached out to our county commissioners. There was some funding hanging out there that they were trying to spend related to COVID. And this was absolutely related to COVID. So I put in a proposal. It was kind of crazy. My director said, wow, you think that's going to work, huh? So I put it out there. I asked for $1 million. I got $1 million. We bought 700 laptops, and we have 700 laptops for our loaner program now. And those laptops are to be used for our students for either IETs, regular classes, just whatever the need is. And in addition to that, we've been able to put some digital literacy software on there, and we're testing on them as well to address the assessment issue. So it was crazy. It's kind of like I tell people, you just go out and ask. The worst thing that can happen is they'll tell you no. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah, so everybody has county commissioners in your area. Go out to a commissioner meeting. They're open to the public. Start to know people and just ask. And now I'm going to go back and ask for some broadband because, of course, that's our big issue right now. We can't afford to pay for hotspots and MiFis, you know, for these 700 laptops. So my next thing to tackle is that whole broadband. So this is a perfect discussion for me. So.
Janine, that's amazing. Michelle Vick attended the Texas Broadband Summit. If you look in your chat, with some great comments here about what they identified as necessary. Michelle, would you be willing to unmute and share some of this with us?
Sure. I didn't know I was going to have this opportunity. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think what I came away from that summit, just my key takeaways, it was in May, and it was a great variety of stakeholders who were there. And one of my biggest takeaways was this is going to take a lot of different stakeholders within a community to really see digital equity happen within the community. And so really understanding who all the stakeholders are and what their roles are and what they can bring to the table within a community seemed very important. And really trying to figure out some structures for bringing those stakeholders together, because it is very fragmented. We don't know who all the players are in each of our communities a lot of the times, and we're not all working in a coordinated way. And then I think that the 3 A's of availability, like is broadband or other infrastructure available widely in your community, and there was a lot of focus at this summit on rural communities. So The answer was no. If it is available, is it accessible? Like, is it affordable? And hearing like what they pay in rural areas compared to urban areas was very eye-opening as far as price, because of the lack of competition in rural areas, the prices are a lot higher. But even within urban areas for our populations, is it affordable? Are devices available? Is it accessible that way? And are skills available? Is it accessible that way? And then is our population adopting digital use? And a lot of times that's about developing those skills and seeing the value of it and then changing some habits. And I think that I walked away thinking, for us in adult education, I'm at the new distance education PD center that Mahalia talked about at the beginning. A lot of our role is probably more in the accessibility area and a lot in the adoption area, but each stakeholder needs to understand where they can make the biggest impact in those 3 A's, and then bringing those stakeholders together like they were talking about doing in Tarrant County, and understanding, okay, well, if we're having an issue in this area, let's reach out to this stakeholder, and all of that collaboration and coordination is super important. So it's past time actually to start putting those, bringing those structures together so that we're less fragmented and we've got a plan to work together and move things forward.
Michelle, that was great. That's right. That's right on point for what our committee has been talking about. What does it take to bring the players together to be able to make a difference? So thank you for sharing that. Mahalia, how do you want to move forward from here? We're kind of, we have Digital Texas. When I started looking into everybody doing this, to reinforce Michelle's point, there are a lot of people doing a lot of work on trying to address this issue. And what can the Texas Workforce Commission's role be to help make sense out of that for all of the adult literacy providers in Texas?
Yeah.
That's the answer. That's the question we're trying to answer right now.
And it's a really great question. And Brian Owens with Commissioner Demerson's office had shared something in the chat, and I wanted to kind of let everybody know and be aware of what that is. So I had talked recently at our Distance Learning Technology Symposium about the Texas Broadband Office, which, you know, it's one of those things with, there's just so much going on. I was like, how many people even know that this exists outside of a person that works in state government? Probably very few. But it's out there. They have been sort of working on this for several years now under the Texas Comptroller. So I wanted to thank Brian for sharing that resource, because it's a good blueprint if you're curious about, well, how is Texas being responsive? How is the state of Texas kind of being responsive, and what is the plan moving forward, and what does that kind of look like? So it's a kind of a 50,000 foot view. But I also think that, especially with, and I had shared this with the committee members, I think in a previous discussion, with some of the federal funding that is out there and that is available for states to apply for, adult education is specifically mentioned in there. And I think that's because they understand the role that adult education plays with individuals that just have lower skills, lower language skills. And, you know, digital is the new language, right? It's like, it's a language all its own, just like any other language, and you have to learn it. And you have to be very purposeful in teaching people that language. And so I think it's a good resource for everybody to kind of see. And then as we move this forward, Steve, I feel like this is going to be something that's going to, you know, this isn't a quick fix. And the access is always kind of the piece. And I think that's always the first piece people focus on, because it's the most real, right? It's like, I literally can't get on the internet, or I can't, you know, there's certain things. And the second part of that is, well, once you get access, do you know how to utilize it effectively to improve your education or your employment opportunities? And how does that support economic mobility? And all of those kind of much bigger questions that we have. So I feel like this is going to be probably an ongoing discussion for the committee members. I love the fact that, Janine used a great example for funding. And I find this not just with this particular topic, but with so many other topics. There's money out there. And sometimes there's a lot of money out there, but people don't know where it is, and they don't know that it's out there, and they don't know how to get it, and they don't know how to apply for it. And sometimes it's just, it takes an army of folks to really be sitting there and keeping an eye on every little funding stream that may be available to leverage. Janine, that is great. I was super excited for you guys. That's awesome. So Steve, I think from here, we continue to, think about this, and I'm sure that this particular topic will lead us into whatever the committee wants to focus on for the next meeting. It'll kind of probably keep coming up, and we'll keep talking about it. And, I look to the committee members to really guide, any continued discussions on this topic.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think we covered the ground that we wanted to cover today. This requires and deserves a lot of thought. One of the thoughts the committee had as well is that with the new funding coming down from the federal government, we want to do what we can to make sure Texas is well positioned to take advantage of any funding that comes up. And so if there's anything that we can do proactively as a committee or with the Texas Workforce Commission, or reaching out to other individuals and organizations that are involved in this issue, we would like to identify those to make sure that we're taking advantage of every opportunity we can. So with that, Janine, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I've really enjoyed the discussion and from hearing from everybody, but I wanted to just comment really quickly on Mahalia, her chat. The access was definitely like number one. We needed to make sure we could provide that. And then you're exactly right. We need to make sure that we're providing the resources for them to be able to effectively use that technology. We purposely have put together like a tracking system that's going to encompass some measurable actions as far as like if the individual was unemployed at the time that we assigned them a laptop and they finished their IUT, did that of course lead to employment? Because those are some of the things that, we want to help with education and then get them into employment. So to kind of track it and see, is this making a difference and what kind of difference is it making? Additionally, tying it back, just because we're in the AEL world, tying that back to our measurable skills gains and making sure that that equipment, makes a difference. And then being purposeful about the process of how we hand it out, make sure they're ready for it before we give them the equipment. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. So.
I'm hearing a future TWC workforce conference session. I'm always bringing our AL providers in with me because I'm up here, and I feel like it's my role to bring in the actual practitioners, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be able to speak to really how to implement things and what that looks like, and what those challenges are. So I always appreciate our AL providers riding shotgun with my crazy conference session ideas and really bringing all that great information forward. So Steve, did you have anything else? If not, I'm happy to close this up here.
Nothing else for me, so take it away. I just want to thank I want to thank Janine and Brenda and Diana for working with me on this, and I look forward to our next session. And thank you, Mahalia.
And that's pretty much what I wanted to say too, is just thank you guys so much for joining us again today. I look forward to the next discussion that we are going to have. So our next meeting is planned for September 14th. Who knows what will happen between now and September 14th. I feel like there's 1,000 things that occur within, just rocket speed here. But we'll probably be reaching out. Steve will be reaching out to members to work on the topics for the next agenda. I thank everyone from the commissioner's offices as well as our general public for joining us today. I hope you found it beneficial, and feel free to reach out to me or the committee members, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.